All right, good afternoon, everybody. Might be good morning for some of you, depending on where you are as far as the time zone's concerned. But it's 1 p.m. Central here in Central Texas. This is the August meeting of the Rogers Hornsby Chapter of the Society for American Baseball Research. My name is Gilbert Martinez. I'm the chapter commissioner and very glad to have you all join us today. We are a very active chapter. For those that don't know, we are based in Austin, Central Texas, but we also cover South Texas as well. We cover a large area of the state, but many of our activities are in Austin or the Central Texas area. We have a streak going because we're SABR baseball people. We like our numbers. We have a streak of 213 consecutive months with a meeting. That's a streak that goes all the way back to December of 2006. We just enjoy each other's companies. We enjoy talking baseball. We do a number of things through the course of the year. We have a big winter meeting in January in San Marcos at Texas State University. And then we also do a variety of things over the course of over the course of the year. We go to Round Rock Express games in Round Rock, Texas. We also go to see the San Antonio Missions down in San Antonio. We also have a World Series watch party that we get together for every October, which is a lot of fun as well. And then we do a variety of other things as well. We like to put on trivia quizzes. We like to test each other with our knowledge of what's going on. And it's a lot of fun. And so really excited today to have a guest speaker join us today. He stepped out of the screen for a moment, but I'm so glad he's back with us. I'm so excited to introduce to you Aaron Fischman. I put this in the meeting announcement. He's written a book that was just published in June called A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. And so for those that may not know, the Japanese word gaijin means foreigner or outsider. And so this is really about an American baseball player who wanted to be a major league baseball player and then got an opportunity to go to Japan and had tremendous experience there before returning to fulfill his dream to pitch also in the major leagues. And so Aaron Fischman is a sports writer, an editor, and multimedia journalist. He's award-winning in the area of journalism. So I've shared with him my background in journalism and my interest in baseball and sports, and as many of you know, my interest in Japanese baseball. So I even broke out my Chunichi Dragons jersey just for today. I don't have any Tokyo Yakult Swallows jerseys or caps, but I need to add that to my collection. But please join me in welcoming Aaron Fischman. He's going to tell us about this book that he's just published, tell us the story of Tony Barnett, who pitched for the Texas Rangers and then also for the Chicago Cubs, as well as in Japan, as I mentioned. And then really want to make this interactive to where we can ask questions and kind of have a back and forth. And so, Aaron, I really want to turn it over to you and tell us about this book of yours.
Thanks so much, Gilbert. First of all, the reason why I stepped out of the frame for a second was I was trying to find my Swallows cap and just not very organized right now, and I don't know where it is. But but anyway, you reminded me of that. Um, I feel like my the agenda for today's might be a little bit non-traditional compared to what you guys normally do, if you even have a norm. So bear with me if that's okay. I planned on reading about 10 passages, but all but two would be pretty short, 2 minutes at the most or something, where I would do a little explication or context before or after, but nothing too long, and then um, say a few things kind of around then, and then open it up to questions from either you, Gilbert, or any of the people assembled here. I wanted to start out with a trivia question, if you don't mind, and I don't know what the best way to do that is with a lot of people here. And I mean, anyone could really could have their mics on and say if they'd like to, but I thought it was really interesting that Tony Barnett, person this book centered around was born in Alaska, and actually only 12 major leaguers have ever been born in Alaska. He was one of six pitchers to make the majors from the state of Alaska. Just kind of random fun fact, he didn't live in Alaska that long. He grew up in Seattle, but
Hmm.
does anyone know who the person who started the most games, who was born in Alaska? He's really well known, won
Hmm.
over 200 games, six-time All-Star. I won't give more clues because it might be really obvious to someone here right away. Um, he's been in the news a lot lately for things that are not great, let's just say.
Chilling.
Yes.
Ah.
Kurt Schilling, and he played the most games as a pitcher from Alaska by a landslide. Second place person, not even close. Does anyone know who that is? This is a tough one. Tony's third in games pitched from Alaska. This guy pitched for 8 seasons. He actually made the All-Stars once, but didn't have that great numbers. I think he was just the lone representative from his team that year. I think it was in 2003. Should I just say it?
Mhm.
It's Sean Chacon. That's probably a name that a lot of us have either forgotten about or never knew. But uh, I can I can start now. So with that out of the way, um, what do you think, Gilbert? I was thinking of reading the prologue because I think it's a good hook into the story. It is about 6.5 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine, Aaron.
Okay.
We're in your hands.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And then after that, I'll step back and give a little bit more context into the book. And I think it's good to start with the prologue also because that was kind of the same strategy that I adopted with the prologue, where it's just kind of to draw the reader in, but it's devoid of any context really. And then the first chapter takes a step back and actually looks into why the hell is he in Japan? How did it end up that way? And how did he make that decision? So, um, okay, so I'm gonna get started. The 11-hour flight from Los Angeles has arrived at its destination, Tony Barnett's new home. As the 6'1" white man with long black hair steps off the plane and into Tokyo's Narita International Airport, the cameras begin flashing. The Japanese media are waiting specifically for him and a couple fellow American pitching imports. It's an awfully novel feeling for a man who was largely anonymous the previous season in AAA with the Arizona Diamondbacks Reno Aces. Born in Alaska, before spending the bulk of his childhood in a suburb of Seattle, Washington, the 26-year-old is certainly no seasoned international traveler. It's his first trip outside North America, let alone to Asia. There's no translator yet, but greetings and questions fly at him in Japanese and broken English. He smiles, taking in as much of the scene as he can. Trying to avoid doing anything stupid, he's frozen in the moment. He goes through customs, where the official stamps his passport and collects his embarkation card. After retrieving his three stand-up suitcases, he'll be living out of those for the foreseeable future, and loading them onto a cart, he continues through a set of doors. A slim man with short black hair and long sideburns, named Go Fujisawa, is holding a sign that says Mr. Barnett. Also 26, Go will become Tony's lifeline in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Educated at Indiana State University, he's a Japanese English interpreter employed by the Tokyo Yakult Swallows to work with the team's English-speaking pitchers. After a brief second stop to speak with media members, they're off to the hotel in Tokyo. Meanwhile, in Arizona, where it's still morning, 16 hours behind Japan time, Tony's girlfriend, Hillary Jones, has just gotten to work at her marketing job. She runs her first Google search in Japanese and sees a number of airport arrival photos. Initially, she thinks the media throng must be mistaking him for someone else. They are not. When she returns home, she is thoroughly amused by the Spunichi Annex's treatment of her boyfriend in its morning newspaper. Two pictures accompany an article. A large photo of Tony wearing a standard white hachimaki while holding a rice ball in one hand and a baseball in the other, as well as a smaller photo of him walking into the airport terminal. On the right side of the story, a math equation appears, declaring Tony a cross between actors Tom Cruise and Keanu Reeves, followed by the word Ikimen, which is a newish term that translates to good-looking guy or metrosexual. Clearly, the Japanese media have a unique way of welcoming foreign players. 5,800 miles away, but for all intents and purposes a world away, he begins to get to know his translator. Within days, thanks to Go's apparent omnipresence, Tony likens him to a shadow. As he would later explain, the guy was just on me at all times, making sure that I knew everywhere I needed to be, when I needed to be there, and what I needed for that situation. During the car ride to the hotel, Go starts to describe what Tony will need to know over the coming days and beyond. Following a brief stop to unload luggage, the duo brave the Tokyo evening rush hour, allowing for Tony's first exposure to the city's internationally renowned transportation system. The train is so packed that neither man can move more than a few inches in any direction. They're on their way to meet new teammate Jamie D'Antona, who happened to play in the Diamondbacks organization while Tony did. Although the two never shared a clubhouse, they have previously met and are familiar with each other. The Swallows' lead interpreter and Go's immediate supervisor, Koji Kondo, has arranged reservations for the party of three at a nice yakiniku restaurant. Tony's first experience with yakiniku, which translates to grilled meat and bears strong resemblance to Korean barbecue, is love at first sight. The conversation is a success, too, flowing freely among new friends. D'Antona had played for Yakult the previous season, so he's able to enlighten Tony on the team, Nippon Professional Baseball, NPB, and the Japanese experience more broadly. After dinner, Go leaves the Americans, who take comfort in each other's camaraderie as they stroll the streets. After a marathon of a day, sleep is calling Tony's name. When he wakes up the next morning, it will be January 27th, 2010, with spring training scheduled to start in 5 days. From Tokyo, the team will fly to Okinawa, the fifth largest Japanese island, located approximately 400 miles south of mainland Japan. Without snow and boasting warmer winter temperatures than the other prefectures, Okinawa is an ideal training spot. There, Tony will debut as the Swallows' newest foreigner. By rule, each NPB team is permitted to field a maximum of only 4 foreigners, known in Japan as Gaijin, including no more than 3 position players or 3 pitchers on its active top team roster at any time. To open camp, he will be the only newbie among the foreigners, joining Korean closer Chang Yong Lim, Canadian outfielder Aaron Guile, who played 5 seasons with the Royals and Yankees, and the aforementioned American first baseman D'Antona. He has to remind himself the whirlwind of the past 24 hours did indeed occur, as surreal as it seemed. Just a few months earlier, at his family's Thanksgiving dinner in Washington, Tony would never have guessed that he'd be playing baseball in Asia the following season. Then his big league dreams felt so close to being achieved. Those hopes would have to be placed on the back burner, hidden away for now. Rather, it was time to tackle the challenge of the present, surviving and thriving in a strange foreign land. In his bed in Tokyo, Tony closes his eyes and instantly falls asleep. So that's the prologue of the book, and I didn't read the name of it. It's called Tom Cruise plus Keanu Reeves divided by two. That's the name of the prologue. So now I'll take a step back and try to explain what I just read and what this book is about. So I'm Aaron Fischman. It was a great introduction, so I feel like I don't really need to introduce myself, but I'm grateful to be connected with this chapter. It's really coincidental how it happened through Jerry Miller. So the winter meeting coordinator, I'm not sure if he has another title, but you guys know Jerry. And he met my dad, Joel, who's on this call as well, through a mutual friend at UC Davis. They both went to law school there. And so Austin doesn't necessarily factor into this story exactly, but I love it. I love this venue for my first SABR discussion, and I'm really happy to be here and do this. If I had to give a one-sentence synopsis of the book, I would say something like it's a nonfiction story that's centered around an American pitcher, Tony Barnett's inspiring 6-year journey to Tokyo and back. in pursuit of his lifelong dream, which was to one day pitch in the major leagues. And I don't know if it's much of a spoiler alert. It's on the back of the book, and I probably wouldn't be able to write this book or get a book deal in North America if he didn't achieve that dream ultimately, but he did. And I also just said it. He pitched for the Rangers in Arlington for 3 seasons, and then a little bit with the Chicago Cubs a fourth year. But it's called the Baseball Gaijin. Gilbert explained what that was, and it doesn't necessarily Gaijin have the best connotation, but it's not outright insulting either, from what I understand. And none of the many foreigners that I've spoken with, I mean, because it means outsiders, so that's already not great as it is. But none of the many foreigners that I interacted with had any issues with the term, and a lot of them use it themselves. And as mentioned in the prologue, there are only 4 active Gaijin on a roster at any one time. So naturally, that fosters a closer relationship among the foreigners. Also, expectations are basically through the roof because if you're one of those 4 and you're not performing to expectations or above, then you'll be replaced really fast, whether that means being demoted, which is what happened to Tony many times that first season, or just gone after a season or even during the season, which has happened. Um, I mentioned earlier basically my plan, but the other passages will be nowhere near as long as that first one. Thanks for bearing with me. Wanted to just start with that to set the tone, but all but 2 of them are going to be shorter than 2 minutes. And I do want to say, so even though it's centered around his Japanese experience over those 6 seasons, the last 2 chapters focus in depth on his rookie to that 2016 season with the Rangers. And so, and also if there are any questions in the chat or something, I'll definitely address them, but I get distracted really easily, so I'll wait until I stop talking to do that. But I definitely want everyone to be seen and heard. So yeah, so the last 2 chapters focus in depth on that rookie season in 2016. And the chapter before is a little bit of behind the scenes context, uh, illuminating how that first major league deal came about, and Don Nomura's role, his agent. I'll talk more about Don Nomura a little bit later. He wrote the foreword, and I'll say way more about him later. But just in the interest of time, bouncing around a little bit, but trying to hit the major points. So what I tried to do with this book, and I hope I achieved it, was write a book that's kind of beyond the box score, if you will, larger than baseball, where there are enough universal, relatable elements. And I know this isn't necessarily the audience to be saying this to, because almost all or all of us love baseball and or would consider ourselves pretty nerdy about the sport. But I wanted to also be able for the story to resonate with non-baseball or non-sports fans. And I think the resilience, that aspect of it, where it was not a glide path to say the least for Tony to achieve that dream. He overcame obstacle after obstacle, and I'll get into what those are over the course of this discussion. But I think those will resonate with people, anyone trying to achieve a goal, or possibly in an unfamiliar country or place with very little family or friends around them, and just facing all of that pressure, internal or external pressure, and just trying to survive or thrive in such a difficult environment. And also, and again, I'll talk about this later. I know I keep saying that, is the earthquake and tsunami, the Tohoku disaster in 2011. I think that's another example of something that I focus on in this book that's just, no offense to baseball, but way more important than baseball in a vacuum. I think baseball is an amazing game and sport, and what it does for people and how it connects communities is so invaluable, but it's also a lens through which I'm telling those more important stories about life and death, and a nation coming together amid tragedy and things like that. The other thing that I think is really important is just the love and the sense of community that I hope rings throughout this book. So the book is centered around Tony, but it's not intended to be just a strict biography of him. Um, so when I do introduce characters of the on in the ensemble cast, I don't want to just throw them into the fire. So I've tried to, and I think I've achieved it, but we'll see. Give the backstory of all these characters. A lot of them are Gaijin, not necessarily all of them. Like for instance, his interpreter Go Fujisawa mentioned earlier, who was born in a rural part of Japan, but kind of had a toe dipped in both waters because he was educated, as I read, in Indiana State and interned at Indiana State and interned in Chicago, and he speaks English, of course, as well. And but then a lot of them are Gaijin expats who lived or live um, in Japan. Vladimir Valentin is one example, Kurosawa home run hitter who wound up in 2013 breaking Sadaharu Oh's long-standing single-season home run record. Sadaharu Oh, as most of you probably know, just a living legend in Japan. And for a while, that record was protected at all costs. Any gaijin who came even close to sniffing distance of it wouldn't see a strike for months, basically. And so finally, Valentine broke it in 2010. And there's the British blogger, English language blogger, David Watkins. He features prominently in this story, not well known, but I just thought it was so fascinating how these various characters, not only teammates or opponents, but like the blogger, the Canadian sports writer Rob Small, how they factored heavily into Tony's story as well. And I think part of that is of why I did it like that is a function of my initial ambitious and probably unrealistic goal of telling a story that was probably going to be like 500 or 600 pages or something crazy. So as I whittled it down and I got rid of stuff that was more for me and my ego and less serving the purpose of the story, and actually I think strengthened the narrative, I was able to keep, fortunately, a lot of these important, heartfelt elements that give better and bigger context to Tony's plight and struggles and success. And it's not just one baseball player and what's happening on the field in a vacuum. It's all the stuff that's happening off the field, language and broader cultural elements, and his interactions with these friends and rivals and others, and also their interactions that are a little bit off to the side of his, but are important in shaping how and why they ended up in Japan. So I don't know how long that was or how much that made sense, but I think that is a good primer. Um, should I keep going, Gilbert?
Yeah. I want to ask a question, but I don't know if one of your passages might address it.
I think you should just ask it.
Okay. So, but before we get into the details of Tony Barnett's story, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing about, how did this book idea come about? I mean, sometimes, uh, people are classmates or they're friends from childhood and they get an opportunity to tell someone's story. But I haven't figured out like how did you come to tell this story? Could you give us just a little
Yeah.
background about that before we get into the passages?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I don't think you would guess. So, I've been connected with Tony for a long time, and I was an undergraduate at UC Davis, so another Davis reference. And I was writing for a small website called davissportsdaily.com, long defunct. And he was one of a handful of double A pitchers I reached out to he was pitching in Mobile, Alabama, and I knew nothing about his bio, other than he had a good K to walk ratio and logged a lot of innings. And he was the only person to agree to be interviewed. And this was kind of in the early days of Facebook. I didn't even do a traditional interview over the phone or internet. It was transcript. So I typed 10 or 12 questions, sent it in a Facebook message, and then he sent me his responses 3 or 4 days later. And so it was really interesting how it evolved. We just continued to stay in touch and develop that relationship as his story progressively got more interesting. We graduated to him writing blog entries for us, actually. One of them, which I thought was really interesting, was about his first invitation to Diamondback spring camp. This was ahead of his AAA season in 2009, where he was teammates for a quick second with Randy Johnson, and then he ended up blogging about the Tohoku disaster. Um, we something like 3 or 4 days after it happened, which I thought was so fascinating that we could hear from someone. He wasn't, of course, in the Tohoku region, and he wasn't so directly impacted, but he definitely was. Just um, hearing from him right after was really special. But um, I won't go on and on because I could for a while, but then in grad school, I ended up writing about Tony's story for a couple projects. This was at USC, and one was a magazine story. That was the longer one that was 3,000 words. So still nowhere near the length of a book. But so gradually I was accumulating more and more information and building that connection with him. And until those 2013 stories that I had written about Tony, I had never reached out to friends, family, and teammates and or his interpreter. It was only just Tony. So it was just not very substantive at all. So then 2016, late 2015, he signs that major league deal with the Texas Rangers after 6 seasons in Japan. And then months later, before that season started, was when I approached him with the idea of turning it into a book. And he, much to my relief, enthusiastically agreed. And that's still a while ago. So it's been a long journey. Haven't always been working on the project full time. But it it's been a journey, a joyful grind. I've been saying a lot of challenges along the way, but so rewarding too.
Oh, that's terrific. That's the kind of background I needed to kind of understand how this has come together. So thank you so much for providing that. And
My
yeah,
pleasure.
let's hear the passages.
Sounds good. So the rest of the way, because the passages are shorter, I'll be doing two passages in a row or three in a row in one case. And then either before or after, I'll be saying something about some of them. So just trying to get organized. Yeah. So this is the first one of two that I'm going to do right now. And this is from chapter 13. I don't know if anyone has the book with them, but it's on page 38. Um, this is about Go Fujisawa, the interpreter. It's part of his backstory, not the whole thing. Um, okay. I know they want to be understood, said Go Fujisawa of the Gaijin he assisted. I know they want us to understand them. Even if they look like they're doing well, they should have something they're concerned about. And to find that thing is my job. He was born on May 2nd, 1983, in Tazawako, a small, quiet city in the mountainous prefecture of Akita. Go's parents, a banker mom, and a father who worked as a public officer in Tazawako City Hall, let him and his older brother roam free. I was kind of wild, said Go with a laugh, fully conscious of his buttoned-up professional persona. With his friends, he would often head to Japan's deepest lake, Lake Tozawa, where they'd play and explore. Other times, he swam at a nearby river while his dad and brother tried to catch fish. He played baseball and was a pretty good pitcher by his own account. While many of his peers dreamed of playing professionally, he aspired to play for the national team. It was a kid's dream, said Go. So he never fleshed out exactly what he'd do for work. He just knew that members of the national team had to be amateurs and thus could not play baseball for a living. I didn't really know about jobs. There wasn't much around me. It was a really small town. He felt he had only three choices, to be either of his parents' professions or maybe a baseball player since he had so much fun playing. But Go wasn't just physically active. He was a thinker too, voraciously reading a wide variety of comic books and novels as long as they were in Japanese. Young Go never read in English, although in junior high he was taught the language 3 hours each week. I've never enjoyed studying English, said the Japanese English interpreter, dead serious. And then I have one more. It's in chapter 5. The chapter is called Toiling in Toda. And so Toda is the location for the Yakult Swallows Nigun team. Nigun is means second troop. It's basically like the minor league affiliate. In Japan, Ichigun is first troop or the top level team. That's where you want to be, especially if you're a gaijin. But it's not so rare to be demoted, as I alluded to earlier, but it also doesn't feel great. And so he signed this big contract. He's their highly touted addition, and he finds himself in the minors, essentially, the Nigun level. Um, so that is on page, I said 72. Okay. And this one's short. Feeling sorry for himself and sinking in proverbial quicksand, Tony determined he had to revisit the times in his life when the odds seemed most stacked against him, yet he remained resilient and ultimately emerged victorious. He had to, in order to find that light at the end of the tunnel. I finally pulled my head out of my ass and got it back on my shoulders where it belonged and started working out and realizing, you know what? I remember when I was at Arizona State, I was almost done with baseball there too. I thought everyone had given up on me. And that's kind of a teaser for why he thought that, what happened at Arizona State, where he was essentially not even on their real roster. He was kind of, and not even really practicing with the team. So um, that was a trying time for him in Japan. That was part of his first season that was struggle filled, to say the least. And that leads into the next discussion. I will intro it a little bit here. So the Tohoku disaster on March 11th, 2011, it was a 9.1 magnitude earthquake, the epicenter of which was in the Pacific Ocean, not that far from the Tohoku region. That's the northeast part of Honshu, Japan's largest island. That gigantic earthquake triggered a tsunami, and the earthquake and tsunami together led to the level 7 Fukushima nuclear disaster. And to this day, it goes down as the second worst nuclear accident in history after Chernobyl. So it was a major deal. And as I referenced before, it was not only important, but imperative for me to spend a couple middle chapters on this because it was a matter of life and death. People died, people lost loved ones, they lost their homes, they lost electricity. I likened the discussions, the return to play discussions, to what happened after 9/11 in the United States, where they wanted baseball to inspire a nation, but they also wanted to honor the lives lost and not cheapen what happened or their sport and league. And so it wasn't right to rush to play. Ultimately, everyone collectively agreed on, but at first, the Yomiuri Giants manager, he was the main ringleader from what my research and reporting revealed for really trying to get butts in the seats as fast as possible. And so he doesn't really look too great in that, but ultimately it was inspiring how the country came together. And some would argue that the recovery still goes on to this day. And it's what, 14 and a half years, my math is off, 13 and a half years later. So that was an important thing and an essential thing for me to write about. And what I did was, of those two chapters, the first one is on more of a micro level. I tell the anecdotes of the main characters, where they were when it happened. A lot of them were at an exhibition game at Yokohama Stadium, and the game was in the sixth inning, and it ended up being postponed. But a lot of them were not with their loved one. None of them that I feature in the book were with their loved ones, and they had to find them. So that's the first chapter. It's more narrowly focused on the characters that we've come to know and love. But the second chapter is more on a macro level, and it talks about those behind the scenes negotiations that I mentioned regarding return to play, how the rules were going to be changed, capping the games at 3.5 hours, for instance, and or if it is at a certain point not going to extra innings, just because of trying to conserve electricity and energy, and other things like pensioners volunteering to go into dangerous areas to test radiation levels, and protesters going to a big town square and demonstrating against nuclear energy. So I just thought all of those things were just much bigger than baseball and sports alone, and just added the weight and substance to the story that I think it needed and I think that it deserved. So I'm going to read three passages now, and the first one is about the earthquake, but it's on a little bit of a lighter sports note, but it talks about inspiring the nation. And then the next two are more about how Tokyo became home for for Tony and Hillary that second season in 2011. So this is the first of the three passages. It's from chapter 8. It's called Ganbare Nippon, Beginning to Heal, and it's on page 118. By the second Fukushima visit, the nation was still reveling in Japan's exhilarating Women's World Cup victory over the number one ranked Americans. In the quarterfinals, Japan drew the mighty Germans, who were hosting the knockout stage and coming off two straight dominant World Cup title runs. Meanwhile, the Japanese squad, nicknamed Nadeshiko, or Beautiful Flower, had failed to advance past the group stage either time. Despite the long odds, they upset Germany in extra time. In the semis, Japan overcame Sweden with two second-half goals to draw Team USA in the gold medal match. Team USA was a juggernaut. In 25 all-time meetings, Japan had never beaten the United States. Given the broadcast's 3:15 a.m. start, most wouldn't learn the result until they awoke, but diehard fans flocked to bars to watch Japan strive to become the first Asian team to win a World Cup. Each time the United States scored, Japan answered quickly, just when it needed a goal most. Tied at 2, a round of penalty kicks was needed to determine the cup winner. Ultimately, 20-year-old Saki Kumagai nailed the cup clincher, top left corner pocket, out of American goalie Hope Solo's reach. That sent the Japanese players into pure elation as they piled on top of one another. 4 months after one of the most painful moments in the country's history, a grieving Japan was feeling inspired again, at least for a moment. Of course, the country was still experiencing ample fallout from the disaster, including an ongoing reckoning concerning its nuclear state of affairs. So what I was doing with some of these excerpts is I'm trying to have cliffhangers at the end. So I don't know if that sounds weird that I'm ending with something before I'm talking about it, but so after that, it goes on to talk about that ongoing reckoning concerning nuclear energy. These next two that I'm about to read are two of my favorite passages in the book. They're from chapter 9, A Reliever is Born, that talks about his transition to the bullpen after Tony started almost all of his games in the minor leagues, it all but I think three, in the minors as a starting pitcher. And so he was transitioned into a setup man, and then by 2012 became a dominant closer. But although that's the backdrop for this chapter, these are about Tokyo and starting for it to begin to feel like home for Tony and his girlfriend Hillary. After his games, that's when we would go. The two would take off on their bikes as midnight approached and ride around Tokyo. It was super quiet, she said, and nobody was out really. She is Hillary, by the way. These late night bike rides helped them get their exercise in a fun and educational way, and they provided Tony golden opportunities to decompress from the stress that comes with professional competition. For many high-level athletes, it's not as simple as flipping a figurative switch to return to normal life. Everybody does it differently, explained Tony. Some guys internalize it, go home, shut everything down. I don't know, you see it in sports. Some guys drink, some guys go out to nightclubs. You've just got to find what works for you. And that year, that started working. The historic Imperial Palace, located in Chiyoda, Tokyo, was one of his favorite spots to visit on these bicycle trips. Even in rainy weather, they'd excitedly peruse the exterior of Emperor Akihito's primary residence. In addition to the imperial family's private living quarters, the grounds also contain the main palace, an archive, museums, and more. The elegant palace, which was built on the site of the old Edo castle, is a grand testament to the world's oldest reigning dynasty, a fact not lost on a marveling Tony. We don't have these things that are so old and so enshrined in history like Japan does, like a lot of the places throughout the world. It's fun to see where people came from, where cultures derive from, and how they used to be ruled. It's history. And this is the next passage, which is starting a page later on 139. During her first 2 years in Japan, Hillary did not own a cell phone. It was kind of liberating, she said. Early on, Tony bought her a pink compass necklace to make sure she always generally knew where she was. Along with her apartment key, often on the same necklace, Hillary wore the compass out of necessity every day. But over time, the necklace became much more than a security blanket. It became Hillary's most cherished possession from her time in Japan, and to this day hangs in a special place in her home. Cell phone-free liberation almost came with a price. Once, Hillary lost track of time and nearly got stranded in Nikko, a small city in the mountains north of Tokyo. Trails off the main street led to waterfalls, and as one approached each waterfall, wild monkeys started appearing in large numbers. Eschewing the largest, most popular waterfalls, she visited the more secluded ones, moving farther and farther from the train station as the day progressed. Suddenly, she realized it was getting dark. Oh my God, she thought, I have to start running. There's nothing else. There's no taxis, no buses. She was a mile from the station and had to catch the last train of the day. So I don't know. I feel like we're doing okay with time, but I did because I've read about half of the passages. I think I've read 6 of the 10. I just wanted to ask or pause here for a second to see if anyone wanted to ask any questions or make any comments just about what's already been discussed. Oh, and Jerry, I think is raising his hand, and I'll also look at the chat messages as well. Jerry.
Well, first of all, I wanted to kind of add to the backstory, if I could. I've known your dad. I mean, this is a real pleasure for me to have you at this meeting because I've known your dad for over 40 years, and as you indicated, he graduated from Davis Law School in spring of '82, and I started there in the fall of '82. But one other thing that I wanted to mention is that when I moved back to California from Washington D.C. in 1982, I purchased Dodger season tickets, which I hold to this day. I'm probably the only Dodger season ticket holder who lives in Texas, and your father has been part of that of purchasing part of the season tickets ever since. So he's been buying season tickets to the Dodgers at our seats, longer than you've been alive. So I wanted to mention that, and I think I assume that Aaron, that you've probably seen a fair number of games from aisle 1, row G of the reserve level at Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
But I had a couple. I I enjoyed the book very much. You probably
Thank you.
quintupled my knowledge of Japanese baseball, and I thought that the approach was basically a case study approach was very effective. Um, my impression, and one of the things that struck me about the book is that the story is pretty unusual in that it's someone who went to rather than getting a cup of coffee in the major leagues and finding that they were sort of what we call a 4A player, bouncing back and forth between the minors and the majors. Then it seems to me that's the usual way that someone winds up playing in Japan. And for Tony, it was kind of the opposite, where he never he didn't get a chance to to make the majors. At the time, he was a starting pitcher and he wasn't particularly effective. And then went to Japan and basically found himself and carved out a niche as a relief pitcher, and then came back to play in the major leagues. And I wanted to give is it accurate to say that that's a pretty unusual way to go about things? And the usual route to Japan is to at least have some major league experience, either and then go to Japan either when it becomes clear that you're not going to be able to make the majors full time, or after you've been in the majors for a while and you're kind of at the end of your career. Would that be kind of an accurate portrayal?
Yeah, so for the most part, yes. At that time, it was definitely an unconventional route to the major leagues. I'm really glad you asked that question because that's something I wanted to touch upon at the very beginning, and I didn't do that. How unconventional a route it was, because I think that's what makes it so, partially what makes it so inspiring and uplifting. So, as you just mentioned, the most common thing would be for a player near the twilight of his career to go to Japan, squeeze out one or two more contracts. Andrew Jones did that, Kevin Youkilis, the list goes on and on. Or if you're a player in your prime, a lot of times you'll go to Japan and then just that you won't get back to the major leagues. But what was very rare was that Tony left, as you mentioned, with zero major league experience. So that made the odds of him leaving the US in his prime, the odds of him getting back to North America and into the major leagues even more long. So when he made that difficult decision to go to Japan, he was first of all being offered a huge raise in salary. So for a 26-year-old, it makes sense that that would be a big draw. But he knew that he was taking a huge risk, and he had largely come to terms with the reality that by going to Japan, he likely would never make the major leagues, his lifelong dream. And we saw how difficult it ended up being for him, which I'll touch upon in the following excerpt. But now it's a lot less common. The San Diego Padres dominant closer Robert Suarez, he honed his skills in Japan and started there very early in his career. Miles Mikolas ended up getting a huge second contract with the St. Louis Cardinals. He spent a couple seasons with the Yomiuri Giants. Colby Lewis and Ryan Vogelsong are two examples. They're more of the exception than the rule back then. And also they went to Japan right after Tony made his decision to go. So he didn't even have those examples. But Colby Lewis, as a lot of you probably know, then ended up going to two consecutive World Series with the Texas Rangers. Vogelsong won two World Series with the Giants and San Francisco Giants, that is. I forget, I have to specify, with teams like the Giants and the Tigers, who also have Japanese counterparts. But that was more rare. But those two pitchers unmistakably came back as better pitchers after their experience in Japan. The same can be said for Tony Barnett, without a doubt, and Robert Suarez, and a lot of these other guys. So I think, to answer your question in a long-winded way, that yes, it's changing, but it was extremely rare, and because of how rare it was, to me, it makes it that much more inspirational that he was able to go to Japan, pitch 6 seasons for the same organization, and still come back and make his major league debut on the wrong side of 30 at 32 years old.
Do you think that Tony's experience had an effect on some of these other players looking to, go to Japan as a stepping stone to eventually making the major leagues?
I think it definitely played some role. Tony and I were joking about it on our last podcast appearance that he should get half of Robert Suarez's massive contract, but um, now the money that they're making it just dwarfs what Tony ever made as a professional pitcher. But no, but seriously, that would be presumptuous, arrogant, and ridiculous for Tony to take credit for these pitchers' massive success. People like Miles Mikolas and Robert Suarez, they have stuff that they would have ended up being successful and getting paid handsomely regardless of what Tony did. But when you see someone blaze a path that's rare and show that it can be done, and Tony didn't just make the major leagues. He ended up pitching, as we said, for parts of 4 seasons and was a successful relief pitcher by most measures. That proves that it's not so risky to go to Japan anymore. Now, before it was you had to basically light the world on fire from a pitching perspective. You just had to dominate as a hitter as well. If you were a Gaijin going to Japan, because the scouts were mostly just looking at Japanese players. So you had to hit a ton of home runs or basically have like a 1 or 2 ERA and just flat out dominate. Now you don't have to be so dominant to be able to hone your skills a little bit and get another opportunity back in North America. So I think he definitely played an important role. And when people are making their decisions, he's definitely one of the cases that they study. Really good questions. Thank you. If there's nothing else right now, then I'll go to the next 2 passages. So Tony was really bad that first year, and I'm not exaggerating. He couldn't locate pitches. He was walking batters left and right. When you're pitching an NPB, it's a smaller league. So there are only 12 teams in Nippon professional baseball, 6 in the Central League, 6 in the Pacific League. So that means that you're pitching against 5 teams often. If you can't figure out 2 of the teams, you're in trouble. That was Tony's major issue that first season. The Yomiuri Giants and Hanshin Tigers, something like his ERA was 10 or 12 or something against those 2 teams. And it was decent against everyone else. But when 40% of your starts are against the same 2 teams that you can't figure out, then that's a major problem. So that's what led to all those demotions. He ended up getting sent home before the season even ended so that they could make room for younger players to get more playing time, and spent a lot of time in Toda, as I mentioned before. But he then became a relief pitcher, and just to streamline it, he developed a cutter. And this was 3 days before the Tohoku disaster. In an exhibition game, so the manager Junji Ogawa and the pitching coach Daisuke Araki, they noticed, wow, that pitch is really effective, and they pinpointed a setup role for him. Chang Yong Lim was still their closer, the Korean closer who had been successful for the last few years with the team, but they wanted Tony as a setup guy. He had to change his approach mentally, where you're not, to quote him, saving your bullets. You can kind of go all out. He added 2 to 3 miles per hour to his fastball. He showcased his full repertoire of pitches, because essentially you're coming in for 1, 2 innings at the most, usually just 1 inning. And you don't have to pace yourself over 5, 6, 7 innings and worry about going through the lineup 3 times or more. So it was a change in approach tactically. He developed that devastating cutter that opponents couldn't hit. He's developed a splitter that got really good by his second season in relief. That was 2012 when he became a dominant closer. Also, after that first year, organizations stateside were not interested in him. And he was worried that he would have to play independent ball. The Swallows released him. He didn't think they wanted him. So it took a fluky thing to happen. There was a Korean pitcher who failed his physical and would have been the fourth and final Gaijin on that roster. But because he failed the physical, they thought, okay, we know Tony Barnett. He comported himself in a professional, mature manner, even though he struggled. We know him, so we'll bring him back in the hopes that he'll do better. So it was almost just a one and done, just 1 year failed experiment, and there wouldn't have been a book. But so anyway, he got that second chance. It ended up working out, but it was a long process. And then he becomes so dominant by 2012 as a closer. He's starting to feel like, okay, now soon I can go to the major leagues. I'm around 29 at this time or whatever it was. But he got a huge 2 year, $3.2 million contract by the Swallows. So he signed it. It's hard to turn down $3.2 million. I think we'd all agree. And what happened was, unfortunately, although he was getting paid, Tony is just so competitive, wants to succeed, and hated being injured most of 2013 and 2014. And when he was healthy, he was just not the pitcher that he knew he could be. So all of that combined to extend his time in Japan. He loved it in Japan. He ended up forming a strong sense of community with the organization and his friends and fans over there. But it was that lifelong dream, that nagging goal to pitch in the major leagues that was eating at him. And so those major injuries delayed it. But he was able to really put everything together that 2015 season at 31. And here's a passage from that time. And then the next one is going to be about his agent, Don Nomura, and the posting system. This one's pretty short. Oh, I don't know. It's 3 paragraphs. Following their winning formula, Ogawa handed a 4-2 lead to the bullpen, which combined for 3 innings of 1-hit ball, including Tony's record-setting 38th save. Again, he was chosen as one of the team's heroes, and for the only time in his Japanese career, he kept the save ball as a memento. As he walked off the field, the pitching coach, whose record had just been relegated to second best, gave him a huge hug. He was so happy, recalled Tony. Shingo Takatsu had a sense of humor about the whole thing as well. It was really funny, said Tony. He was quoted in the paper saying, "In hindsight, I wish I would have used him less in save situations." Takatsu was a Swallows legend. Nevertheless, Tony's 2015 season easily eclipsed Takatsu's 2001 campaign in virtually every key metric, including innings, ERA, WHIP, and strikeout rate, among others. The individual accomplishments were nice, but from Tony's perspective, Yakult had a grander purpose. You could just kind of tell there was something different about the team. A lot of good things were happening that year. A lot of milestones, a lot of records, a lot of guys having really good years, and we weren't letting the celebration last. We were celebrating it real quick, and then we were moving on to the next game because I think there was a feeling around the team that was our chance of going for it all. And I didn't say this before, and Jerry and those of you who have read the book know this and or are familiar. The Yomiuri Giants are essentially considered like the Yankees of NPB, whereas the Swallows were their long-suffering intra-city rival. And so I liken it to the Clippers and Lakers, even though in recent years it's been different with the Clippers, although no championships, I know. But the Swallows had a golden era in the 90s and early 2000s where they won, I believe, 3 championships and went to 4 Japan series. But historically, the Yomiuri Giants dominated. And as I mentioned, they sure did that first season against the Swallows and Tony. So Tony and the Swallows were able to get redemption, sweet redemption, that final season in Japan, 2015 for Tony, where they won the pennant. That's the best regular season record. And then they eliminated those rival Yomiuri Giants in the second stage, the final stage of the climax series to get to the Japan series. So it was not only a team-wide accomplishment, but Tony will admit it, he felt so much personal individual redemption from getting the final outs against the Yomiuri Giants team that he hated. He'll be honest about it. He wasn't just a hired hand like a lot of these foreign players where they're getting paid by this organization, but they're just doing their job and their heart and soul and passion isn't in it. Tony lived and died with every win and loss that year, and to be able to eliminate the Yomiuri Giants on the grandest of stages, that just meant the world to him. And that was how he ended up going out for his Japanese playing career. And so that's something that he'll remember forever. The next passage is a little bit longer. And so it's about Don Nomura and the posting system. Don Nomura wrote the foreword. He's credited for bringing Hideo Nomo to the United States and the Dodgers in the mid 90s. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that's in the passage that I'm about to read. So I should just read the passage. But here goes. It's from chapter 17, Big League Dreams. This incident led to the 1967 United States-Japanese Player Contract Agreement, more commonly known as the Working Agreement, wherein neither MLB nor MLB would interfere with the other side's rights to players. Accordingly, no Japanese-born player appeared in the majors again for another 3 decades. Then, in 1994, Don Nomura got involved, forever changing the face of Japanese and American baseball, as well as the flow of talent from NPB to MLB. It was understood that an NPB player could not sign with a major league team unless he reached free agency after 10 years of service or his contract was sold to the new team. But in fact, as Nomura would momentously discover, the Japanese uniform players' contracts reserve clause contained a loophole that meant a player who voluntarily retired from NPB could then legally sign with a major league team. Once his client Hideo Nomo failed to come to terms with the Kintetsu Buffaloes, Nomura advised him to retire. A free Nomo subsequently signed with the Dodgers, and although Kintetsu protested, it had no recourse. No rules were violated. In 1997 and 1998, respectively, Nomura had his fingerprints all over moves that resulted in pitcher Hideki Irabu and young infielder Alfonso Soriano leaving their NPB teams and landing with the New York Yankees. Many parties seethed, including all non-Yankee MLB teams who were not given a chance to bid on Irabu, and the Japanese teams that lost Nomo and Soriano. The remaining NPB teams feared their players could soon be poached. With change sorely needed, the posting system was created when the Oryx Blue Waves general manager rewrote the working agreement, and the MLB and NPB commissioners signed the pact in December 1998. Although the specific rules have changed over the years, the broad framework, with a posting or transfer fee at the system's core, has remained in place ever since. And I'm going to skip the next paragraph and then read one more paragraph in the first sentence of the next on page 241. Nomura makes no secret about his utter disdain for the posting process he inadvertently helped to create. In an interview with author Robert Whiting, Nomura once referred to posting as a slave auction, and he stands by his use of the metaphorical term today. Most troubling to Nomura, the system provides Japanese players little to no autonomy. Under the rules, NPB teams can refuse to post any player indefinitely. The system most prominently benefits Major League Baseball and NPB next. The posting player is a distant third. Even if a player is permitted by his team to post, his earning power is theoretically limited because his MLB team must also compensate his former team. Thus, players often agree to contracts below their true market value. Despite the system's flaws, Nomura doesn't see it changing significantly anytime soon. There are too many vested interests. growing up in Tokyo, Nomura was a rebel from the start. That's another example of a cliffhanger. And then I talk about how he was a rebel from the start. I I will just say really quickly that it's been a pleasure having Don Nomura involved in the process. I thought it was really cool that he agreed to write the foreword. He's featured prominently throughout the book, understandably, as Tony Barnett's agent. So this whole experience started with Tony getting a text from a Japanese agent, and that was Don Nomura. He was notified by his Reno Aces teammate Bobby Korecki, who was also asked about going and didn't have any interest at the time. But um, so it's been really cool and special to have a legend like Don Nomura be such a big part of this project. And I have two more passages that I want to read. I know we've been going on for a while. Just want to check in with you, Gilbert, or anyone else, if there's anything that you want to ask about or discuss. I know I've kind of dominated the conversation, but
Yeah, Aaron,
I want it to
Aaron,
be collaborative. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
As it relates to Don Nomura today, what does he think about the proliferation of Japanese coming into the league today? And what does the Japanese league think about losing their stars to MLB? Any insight on that?
It's hard for me. Thanks for the question. This is my Uncle Ross. I appreciate you joining us today. The way you worded that question, it's so hard for me to speak for what they feel in Japan and what Don Nomura feels, but um, I know Don is excited that Japanese players are doing so well in the United States. And Don splits his time between Honolulu, Los Angeles, and Tokyo. So he's all over. He like Go Fujisawa, he has a toe dipped in multiple worlds, but even more so. Um, but I can't really get in their heads in answering that question. But personally, I'm so excited about it. Shohei Ohtani, I saw Jerry's Shohei Ohtani shirt. I love it. Um, I don't think I really even need to say anything. We all are experiencing it. It's just so amazing to see what this guy is doing on a baseball field. He's not even pitching right now, and he's still probably the best player in the league. And sometimes he does pitch and he throws in the high 90s and he's good doing it. So we've just never seen a guy like this, maybe since Babe Ruth, but I think he's so much more than Babe Ruth, if I'm allowed to say that, but we don't need to compare. Um, but I don't know if I answered your question. How'd I do?
Well, I think it's fair to say you can't speak for them. I'm just curious if in your discussions with Don, if today, if the situation today came up, and how he felt about it.
Well, we spoke a lot more before this off season. Um, so I haven't really talked with him explicitly about this, but I know he's enjoying seeing what Shohei Ohtani is doing. And on a broader scale, I didn't even mention Yamamoto, Imanaga on the Cubs, and the list goes on and on. It was just such a huge offseason for Japanese players. We saw Japan win the World Baseball Classic recently. And so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's so exciting for me to see Japanese baseball, which has been such a long running cultural tradition, just so central to everyday life in Japan, really be getting the global attention that it's long deserved. And I think that's just going to keep increasing as time goes on.
Who knows? Don may be in Hawaii now, scouting the Hawaiian Little League team for his future clients.
It's definitely possible.
Yeah. Great
Does
job,
anyone
Aaron.
else? Thank you. Does anyone else want to chime in before I do a couple more passages? Okay, so the first one is pretty short. It's about Texas's bullpen, that 2016 rookie season for Tony. The 2016 Texas Rangers built their bullpen with a diverse array of characters, including Tom Wilhelmsen, Sean Tollison, Keone Keela, Sam Dyson, Jake Diekman, Matt Bush, and of course, Tony Barnett. Each pitcher took his own bizarre route to Texas, leading ESPN writer David Schoenfield to call the group a motley collection of relievers in an April piece for his now defunct Sweet Spot blog. Boasting an average of about 2 seasons of major league experience, they were a collective bargain too. Their modest salaries enabled Texas, with its top 10 payroll, to afford the likes of Cole Hamels, Shin-Soo Choo, Prince Fielder, and Adrian Beltre, while still retaining flexibility. Among the motley crew, only Tollison, Wilhelmsen, Diekman, and Tony were earning more than $1 million. And Matt Bush, he had a, let's just say, controversial return to the league or debut in the majors. He was also over 30, or I think he might have been 30. So I thought it was interesting that he and Tony shared a bullpen in Texas as 30-year-old relievers who are technically rookies, even though Tony, in his mind, did not consider himself a rookie. He had been through so much at that point in his career and been a star closer twice already in Japan. But he humbly did a lot of the rookie duties, carrying the bullpen bag, buying candy for the team and their veterans, performing at the talent show in full Gene Simmons Kiss gear. Not, I was gonna say makeup, but they didn't actually make him wear makeup, but he would have been down though. There's one more excerpt that I want to read, and it just kind of skips to the end a little bit. Oh, that's weird. I didn't highlight it, but I know where to read. Okay, so by season's end, Tony's numbers undoubtedly showed what he'd proven time and time again. He belonged in the major leagues, and not just for a brief cameo, but for years to come. He finished with a 2.09 ERA and was even better after the All-Star break, an 18-game stretch during which he recorded a 1.37 ERA. That was the end of the sentence. All season, a consistently long-haired Tony tormented right-handed hitters who batted 205 and slugged 262 against him. He was trusted, and for good reason. No other Ranger inherited more runners, and he managed to strand nearly 73% of them. He wound up entering about 38% of his appearances in a high-leverage situation, which was more often than 3/4 of 102 qualifying non-closers. Tony leaned heavily on his famous cutter, throwing it more than 2/5 of the time, but it was actually his curveball and splitter, used a little more than 10% apiece, that were most effective in terms of batter outcomes. The curveball was particularly difficult to handle. Much like with his cutter, when unleashing a curveball, he could generate significant horizontal movement. So I know I read a lot of passages. I appreciate all of you humoring me and bearing with me listening to those. There were a lot of stats in there, Gilbert, so I hope that your chapter enjoyed those stats in the final passage. But I have a few other quick things I want to talk about, but I'll turn it over to you right now if there's anything you want to say.
Well, this has just been really great because, our chapter is very diverse in terms of how we love baseball. Some of us love the numbers, some of us love the history, some of us love the international aspect of baseball, and have interest in Japanese baseball in particular, or Japanese players, so you really have brought a lot. That this is not just a baseball story of here's a kid from Alaska, well, born in Alaska, but grew up in Seattle and achieves his baseball dreams. That I really love how you brought in this other context of what was going on in Japan, with the earthquake and tsunami, and how important that was, to the story that you tell in this book. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to share this with us, because we're all looking for something different. We don't all just want the numbers. We don't all just want to know, what was his rookie season like? It's we all have lots of different interests in baseball. So congratulations on the book, and for sharing this with us. I'm very, very grateful. Let me just ask this question, and then I also want to open up to others as well. But your background photo I recognize is from a Japanese newspaper, sort of a display probably of the Japan series or maybe the Climax series. Could you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about that, about what's depicted behind you?
Yeah, definitely. So Tony is doing a star jump there. In this, it's um
Oh, that's him.
he's celebrating the Climax Series win over the Yomiuri Giants. So that was what I was alluding to a second ago, where it just felt so good and so redemptive to eliminate those hated Yomiuri Giants, and be en route to the Japan series. And so in the background, it's Doage, if I'm saying it correctly, lifting up is a time-honored NPB tradition where when you win a big series, or the ultimate prize, the championship, you raise and lower your manager and various key teammates X number of times. It varies. Sometimes it's three, seven, etc. But in the background, I believe they're raising and lowering their manager, Junji Ogawa.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there he is.
I don't know if my head is blocking, but um, and Tony was doing that star jump where he's pumped. He also looks ridiculous, he'll admit. And the internet kind of went wild with it. And they used a hashtag that roughly translates to Tony Barnett crappy Photoshop contest. And that's covered in the book where they're just putting him in all kinds of funny, ridiculous scenarios. One of them is he's celebrating Tokyo winning the Olympics bid with the prime minister. Another one, he's in a Yoshinoya restaurant, excited for being ordering and about to get his food. Um, he's like rotated in all these different angles to form a chain link fence.
Oh my
It's
God.
pretty creative and psycho, and I love it. Just how the internet just went wild with it. But that is Sankei Sports is the publication.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, and if I look, I can read some Japanese, and it looks like that's his name in katakana, next to his leg there. Ba Neto, I think is if I'm reading that correctly. And then someone in the comments noted that the uniform numbers of 100 I also see 109, which is we don't usually see that in Major League Baseball. Our numbers go up to 99, from 0 to 99. So that's kind of funny to see.
Yeah, I don't have any insight into that, but I think that's cool as well.
Yeah.
One funny thing about that, somewhat related, I'm trying to remember if it was not actually this night, but so the when it's the pennant in NPB, it's if you have the best regular season record in your league, so it's a little bit different over there. And the night that the Swallows clinched the pennant that year, they won on a walk-off or sayonara hit. But in their celebration photos, a key starting pitcher had to leave early because he was starting the next day on the road in another city. So in the celebratory photos post game, some equipment manager's wearing his jersey number so that people think the pitcher was actually there, but he wasn't. And so that was a cool fun fact that Tony told me. Yeah,
Nice.
so I thought that was entertaining.
Nice. I love this insight on the Japanese side. Really very interesting to me.
Thank you. I appreciate what you said too about there being something in there for everyone. That's really what I was trying to do because I know that some people are really into the minutia and the numbers and the play-by-play, and I feel like a lot of us in attendance here today are, but that there are a lot of people who can or will be inspired in other ways, whether it's the cultural elements or some of the off the field stuff like how the country came together. Um, in its recovery after the tsunami, and or just family life stuff with Tony and Hillary and raising a newborn in Tokyo and how do you get childcare and Hillary almost getting stranded in Nico with all the wild monkeys and no cell phone and just stuff like that.
Yeah. Uh, Um, Aaron, I'm gonna put in the chat. This is the let's see, that's gonna be a big long link. It's a link to the Amazon
I might
page
have a link.
for your book.
Thank you for
Or
doing that. I
yeah, yeah.
may have one that's not as long.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I
I just
don't.
I just did that very quickly. So
I like how I'm saying that, and then we'll see. I pasted, and it might end up being exactly the same. Oh, I think that worked.
oh yeah, there you go. Oh, that's much better. Much better.
Um, but thank you for doing that. One thing also I wanted to touch upon that relates to what you said, and what I was just mentioning is I have endnotes in there,
Oh,
and they're pretty nerdy or neurotic, I guess you could say, but I just find this stuff so fascinating. But I didn't want it to be in the regular text for the more casual fan or non-sports or baseball fan. So initially, I had the footnotes at the bottom of each page. When I was reading the passages, I wasn't reading footnotes or endnotes, but the publisher and I agreed, and I think it was a good decision and a happy medium to end up putting those at the end of each chapter.
mm,
So if you're like me and like a lot of us and you want all that minutia and that information, you can flip to the end of each chapter and devour that content that way. And if not, you could just keep reading and you don't get interrupted by it. I think that was a good balance between putting it at the very end of the book. I feel like people wouldn't necessarily have wanted to do that. And
yeah.
it's still more fresh in your mind when it's content from that particular chapter, but it doesn't necessarily interrupt the flow when you're reading page by page and you're seeing all this stuff on the bottom of each page. So that was one thing I love doing, which I think is a bonus for people like us who love that type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, let me open it up. If there's anybody that'd like to jump in with a question or a comment, maybe someone who hasn't spoken yet, you can drop it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and jump in.
Right. In addition to just Tony's own burning desire and passion to make it to the MLB, did he share with you at all anybody else or any other moments that really kept his fire burning? Was there anybody, you know, outside of baseball, within baseball, that really kept his fire burning to really endure this journey?
Um, Hillary was really instrumental. They're no longer together, unfortunately, but she was so important throughout his journey, and they share two daughters together, um, and he was felt really isolated, alienated, and alone just when he was in Tokyo those first couple months while she was still at Arizona State in school. And she loved him so much and it was so important for her to rush to be by his side in Tokyo that she missed her college graduation to be hurry up and be there with him. And she was instrumental throughout the process, so accessible and open about everything, and often understandably so, more times than more available than Tony during the course of busy seasons. So she was one person who definitely kept him engaged and inspired. His dad, Phil, has always been so important in his life. And these Gaijin teammates, he ended up growing really close with Aaron Guile, who was seen as a mentor by him. He was a little bit older. He was very injury prone at that stage of his career and actually most of his time with the Swallows. But interestingly enough, now it came full circle. They both work for the Swallows in their scouting department, and they're essentially neighbors in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And so they'll have lunch together from time to time, talk about each other's kids, um, just just hang out with each other, enjoy each other's company while still being grateful to be a part of baseball and a major part of the organization that they owe so much to. I wanted to say this earlier, but I think of the book in a sense as kind of like Tony's love letter to Tokyo and or the Yakult Swallows as told through me. just because he is just incredibly grateful to the organization and the city for welcoming him with open arms, giving him the opportunity to succeed and overcome so much on such a large stage to facilitate him achieving that lifelong dream. And so that's why I'm so happy that I would say about 85% of the book is set in Tokyo. It's largely a Japanese baseball book with, like I said, the last couple chapters going really in depth on his rookie season. And that made it more marketable in North America, the fact that he did get that deal in Texas. But I think of it as like his love letter to Tokyo and the Swallows.
That's nice.
There is one thing I want to note before we end, and I don't have to be the last word, obviously. I just want to make sure to get this plug in. So Tony and I are doing this giveaway contest, and so for interested readers who do want to purchase a hardcover copy on or before August 17th, so that's a week away, you'll be entered into a contest to win either a second signed copy of the book or signed baseball cards by Tony. And essentially everyone will win because we're doing 34 of every 43 hardcover copy sold. 34 is his jersey number with the Swallows. 43 is what he wore with the Rangers. But 34 of 43 will win. But to be completely honest, we are not close to 34 yet in this giveaway period. So that's why I'm saying I think well over 80% of people who purchase a hardcover copy will win. I think almost everyone will win, either signed Tony Barnett baseball cards or a signed hardcover copy in addition to the one you purchase.
And Aaron, is that just purchasing it through Amazon or wherever?
Good question. So it can be through anywhere. Amazon is one of the easier ones. IndieBound, which is through a bookshop link, is slightly more expensive, but a lot of people like doing that to not support Amazon, arguably an evil corporation. But Amazon is the cheapest. You can also get it in person if it's at your Barnes and Noble, or request in person or online that Barnes and Noble orders it in. And then all you'd need to do to qualify for the giveaway is send me, and I'm on Instagram and X at by Aaron Fish. I'll put it in the chat. But also then on a lot of those pages is terrible at multitasking, is my email address. And so you can also just email me. And all you'd have to do is just email or DM proof of purchase, which shows that you purchased a hardcover copy between July 24th and August 17th. And then there's only one other thing, and that's post 1 to 3 sentences on a social media platform of your choosing about why you're excited to read the book. And there's an Instagram post that I made that had all these a few other things like hashtags to include and stuff. And I mean, I'll link the Instagram post, but I don't really care about any of that stuff. To enter into the contest, it doesn't really matter about the hashtags. All you have to do is just purchase a copy, show me that you purchased a hardcover copy during that period, and then post 1 to 3 sentences about why you're excited to read the book, just to help spread the word. And I really appreciate all of you having me, listening to my near monologue so intently. And I hope everyone got a chance or gets a chance if we have a little bit more time to say or ask what they want to say. And I'm also feel free to reach out to me directly whenever.
Aaron, thank you so much. This has really been a lot of fun. We have our meetings in person. We're just a group that likes to get together for lunch and talk baseball. But we also do these Zoom meetings from time to time through the year because it just makes it easier sometimes. We're all busy. We've got things going on, but it also gives us the opportunity to talk to you. Are you based in Los Angeles? Is that where you're based?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am, and Tony's based in the Phoenix area.
Yeah. So, this would be very difficult. I mean, unless you were visiting the Austin area, we could, the stars would align. But anytime you're in
Hmm.
Austin or Central Texas, maybe we can have you join us for one of our in-person meetings sometime. If you're ever here, please reach out and let us know.
I really appreciate that. That means a lot. And I will see if it ends up working out. I know Dallas is not anywhere close to Austin, but still, I may do something in Texas at some point down the line to help promote the book, and I would be happy to join you all. My dad asked a question in the chat and just about how I or Tony can be contacted for interviews, podcasts, and appearances. So I guess for now it might be best just that I put my email address if anyone wants to email me or anything if they have any ideas. But Tony and I have been doing a lot of promo trying to get the word out there. We actually did our first joint interview together yesterday that'll be out early next week. But we're happy to do more media, are excited to do it, whether it's both of us together or individually. And the publishing company, Skyhorse, has has a couple people on the publicity team, and so Rachel Marble and Janina Keyser are two of those people on the publicity team, and they can also be contacted. But like I said, you can contact me directly. But I'll put their email addresses here. And I said her name wrong. It's Cryer. Sorry, not Keys.
Aaron, thank you very much for that. We have a big winter meeting, that we've done like 17, 18 years now, in January, where we invite people to San Marcos, Texas State University. And
Mhm.
so there might be a great opportunity for you and Tony Barnett if he's available. We typically do it we do it on a Saturday in early January. And one of the things that we're going to do once our meeting wraps up here, the leadership team on the Hornsby chapter is starting our planning process for that meeting. So that's something we'll be in touch with you about. Maybe that's something that we could try to do. We certainly would be wonderful to hear directly from Tony, but then also have you talk about the story of how this book came together and another opportunity to promote the book. And we're happy to do that for you.
Thank you so much. That sounds great.
Yeah. All right.
It was a little hard hearing you, Gilbert. I thought I heard trash cans banging in the background.
Oh my God.
No, I assure you that's not what you heard. Um,
Okay, okay. I thought so. I thought that's
no,
what
no,
I heard.
Someone
Or a
might have to
little.
mute Ross's
I
mic.
thought a little buzzer going off on you or
yeah, yeah.
something.
No, Jerry Miller and I go back and forth on this a lot. So Ross, I don't know if you're a Dodger fan. Ross, are you a Dodger fan?
Indeed.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to thank you as I thank Jerry Miller as often as I can for Yordan Alvarez. He's a terrific player. And I'm so glad he came from the Dodger system, and I'm so glad he's doing what he does for my Houston Astros. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can't
I just
wait till
had to get that in.
I can't wait till we have another trade, and hopefully we'll rip you off at that point.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. Aaron, thank you again. This has really been a pleasure. And congratulations on the book. Wish you nothing but success and hope we can make something work out, for the winter meeting in January, but we'll definitely be in touch and figure that out as well. But congratulations on the book. And thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us here today. We really, really appreciate it.
The pleasure is all mine. Thanks so much. And I'm looking forward to collaborating more.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Go
Thank
Dodgers.
you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so for the Hornsby members, we haven't set a date yet for the September meeting. But I had some thoughts. I've got a couple of blackout dates for me. I'll be going to Houston for a couple of games, but a couple dates that I'm looking at are September 14th and 15th, which is a Saturday and a Sunday. I'm thinking we've not been at Hurricane Grill in quite some time. So it might be good to get back up there as a in-person location. I don't know if anybody has any strong preferences or what you guys want to do, but just wanted to mention that as we hope to announce a date for the September meeting. But we are set to be back in person. So I think I know college football is going to be back in play, and then professional football, the American kind anyway. So that's, college football on the Saturday, professional football on the Sunday. So it's one or the other. Any strong preferences one way or the other? Anybody? Maybe go with Saturday. What do you think?
Both of them work for me personally, so
Okay.
pick your.
Fine by me.
Yeah. No strong preference.
Okay. Maybe we'll go
I
with
mo-
the
I
Saturday. Maybe?
mostly just play by ear.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, we could play it by ear, Linda, but I like to set it if possible so people
I know.
can plan.
I mean, I
Right.
play it by ear. If you said works for me, I'll be there.
Oh, very good. Very good. Okay. All
Let's
right.
do let's do Saturday. That sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me too. Okay, and we'll tentatively we'll plan on Hurricane Grill, I guess, up in Round Rock, I guess is where that is. Um, or up north, Austin anyway. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. The leadership team here is going to talk about some winter meeting planning. Certainly, you're welcome to stick around if you'd like, but you certainly don't have to. We just want to just kind of see where Jerry is with his planning process and what we can do to help him. And so you guys are welcome to stick around. But for Ryan and Jan, Don, and Jerry, that's what we're going to be discussing now. But for the rest of you, thanks for joining us today, and hope you all have a great day.
Cool.
Thank you.
Oh, and thanks for that, Mike. I appreciate that. That's helpful.
Good. All right. Take care.
All right,
See you,
take
Mike.
care, everybody. All right.
What's up, guys?
How's everybody?
Doing good.
I'm hanging in there.
Yay, good to see you, Jan.
Yeah, I was a little late to joining today. My notification didn't go off for some reason.
Oh no. Well, you know what I should do? Let me go ahead and stop the recording.